Twilight 4, what can you say? Alright, now this is a movie I know a lot of people are going to sincerely dislike, and I'm going to actually preface this entire review saying that this could be the best and the worst of the series, depending on how you look at it. Now, for those that haven't seen my previous reviews of films in the series, I believe I started with New Moon and gave a quick synopsis of the first one. I'm actually a mild fan. I recognize that the series has many faults, Lord knows there's a lot of them, and to be perfectly frank, a lot of it's just sappy, melodramatic fluff, but in all honesty, it's nice to have that kind of break from these different types of movies. I can fully appreciate well-acted and crafted masterpiece of a film, but sometimes, you know what, I like just the aesthetic of specific films, and this is a series that I tend to like it because of that. Now, a lot of people will say, you know, the cold, dark look of the town, but you know what, honestly, there's some really beautiful imagery in this entry in particular. There's, regardless of what you think of the actual movies, very well put together soundtracks, and score in this case is quite a prominent feature. And in all honesty, as much as everyone really makes fun of the actors and the acting, it is taking a significant step up, I think, in this case. And, you know, again, people might argue, well, it's about time, but I'll get to that in a second. To start, this is number 4 in a series of 5 films, or what at the moment is at least 5 films. And honestly, if you're coming into it at this point, okay, well, don't bother coming into it at this point, because it makes no effort whatsoever to explain anything that's going on. And while the story may not be enormously deep, there's a larger cast of characters. Just at 4 films in, you really can't help but expect that kind of thing crop up. And so at this point, I'm actually a little curious as why they're predicting this movie is going to make so much more than the others, considering it's, A, not the finale, and 2, the series seemed to hit its glass ceiling. As far as the last couple films have gone, they've kind of evened out to an average 700 million, which is very respectable, of course, but I think much more is maybe pushing it. Maybe the finale. We'll see. Anyway, the story in this actually is wildly divergent from the previous ones. I mean, there's still the same, you know, teenage angst and ennui, always just penetrating every moment of these films, but I will say, despite the inherent silliness of a lot of the plot of the original source material, I'm also a book nerd, I read a lot, forgive me, it's actually very well done, very well handled here. I will say I think the director is not the greatest director. Gods and Monsters is a good film, don't get me wrong. Wasn't a fan of Dreamgirls. But he did a good job with this one. There's some flaws with it. I don't think he's quite a master of pacing, but it's a give and take. I won't get too much into the plot otherwise than what the trailers will already tell you. More or less, Edward and Bella have sex finally, and have a child that is not quite what people think. More or less, the child is eating her from the inside out. They don't think she's going to survive the pregnancy, and that's really the whole thrust of the movie. In the trailer, it also tells you the Wolfpack's involved in that. They're worried that this newborn child, they don't know what it is. They think it's going to be a threat to their territory, and they're kind of going to finally go up against the Cullens, and by and large, the movie actually delivers a lot of the promises what you would think it would be, and for all of the hubbub about it being split up into 2 parts, and this is really where the argument of best or worst movie comes into play, I actually think splitting up into 2 parts helped this part of the story. For one, it really made it seem a little more genuine. I am a mild fan. I don't love the films, but I mean, as far as the last couple have gone, they really have just been pure fluff. Didn't really feel much of anything. I actually felt a little bit in this one, whether that be from continued exposure or that be the slower, more languorous pacing, that gave the actors and the characters a little more room to breathe, and you could actually start to emote more, and you could start to relate to their situation on a more personal level. And that, I think, was a definite success. They really did a much better job with that, and that coupled with the better acting of all of the actors in general. I mean, they're obviously maybe not quite as high as actors in other film series and so on, but they've definitely taken a step up here. They really brought their A game to this, and that really shows through. But that said, the pacing of this movie is really slow. This is a 2-hour movie where not a lot really happens. It is very much character-driven rather than plot-driven, and for fans of the series, that might be the best thing, and if you're not a fan of the series, or you don't give a shit about the series more or less, you're gonna fucking hate this movie. And you know what? I can totally understand that. The series has always been that kind of thing, and frankly, it's always been a guilty pleasure for me. But this is an entry that I feel is not necessarily an amazing movie, but a more legitimate film than the others. It seems less a commercial product than the others, and of course, it's hundreds of millions of dollars being spent on these movies, and their marketing especially, I'm sure, not to mention merchandising. But it seems like there was a little more thought put into this movie, and a lot of the things that made the original source material awkward, you know what I'm talking about if you've read it, or things that just didn't really make a whole lot of sense or seem really that fleshed out, are given the chance to be fleshed out here, and I really, really enjoyed that. There's a lot more location hopping this time around, and it seems more natural than something like a New Moon, where it's, oh hey, now we're here for the last third of the movie for no good reason, for a reason, but especially, more or less. I really did enjoy the plot in this one. I think if you can go with the pacing, I think it definitely just improves the movie all around, because of the sense of progression with the characters and their emotions really helps bring all of the events to the forefront. The movie, the first large portion of the movie is the wedding, and very nice, but honestly not so overblown in the way it's done, that it's not this, again, they didn't spend hundreds of millions of dollars just poured into this one scene. It seems more like maybe what an actual wedding would be like, very kind of personal and enclosed, and yeah, there's some lavish intricacies to it, but it brings back a lot of the side characters too, which I think is especially helps that personal feeling. So, nice bit there. Honeymoon extended, but again, this is what you were getting with part 1 of a film, much like Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows Part 1. This is much more of a mood piece than it is a story piece. Now, obviously, more of a mood piece than Harry Potter was, because Harry Potter just has more story. But it still works to the same effect, I think, and works rather brilliantly in that light. I just have to specify one thing before I continue, is that I really like these part 1s. I'm not going to lie, I don't feel ripped off if they can pull it off. And so far, I haven't seen one that hasn't justified its existence. What can I say? Looking forward to more of them. Maybe a corporate gimmick, but it's one I'm actually enjoying. Skipping right to it, though, I'm taking way too much time reviewing this. The story is quite nice. It really doesn't build up to an enormous climax. They do manufacture a climax that wasn't originally there that actually is not bad. One other thing I have to say, but there is much more of a legitimate threat this time around in the film, not from the completely ineffectual and silly Vulturi that have been vaguely in the previous 2 movies, but from the actual Wolfpack versus the Cullen clan at this time, and that's interesting. It's really nicely framed as far as the production goes. There's no problem I have with this movie whatsoever. Really, really well produced. If nothing else, this movie feels, again, a lot more like a legitimate cinematic experience in production. Great stuff there. Again, soundtrack, really classy stuff. You can tell they got some popular artists, but they also picked out a lot of interesting choices and a lot of interesting songs that accurately reflect the moods. Much so, I thought, with the second film soundtrack as well. It may not be quite as listenable on a pop playlist. It helps the movie, and this is, again, another reason why I don't necessarily think that lyrical songs in movies are a bad thing. I honestly think they can enhance emotion, much in the same way musical songs can enhance the emotion and progress the story as well. So, overall, I think everyone does a great job in this. Not an amazing, but I mean, in comparison to what else have come before, the story, any silly parts have been mostly skimmed over, but they've explained things enough that were awkward to flesh them out a little more and make them seem a little more believable. All of the characters come back in this for some really fantastic appearances. Bella's dad, Charlie, again, fantastic, so funny. This movie has a really good sense of humor despite it being a very dour kind of film in general. If you can take the slow pacing, and it is a very slow, reflective kind of film, I honestly think this is actually a pretty decent film. I'm not sure why it's getting as low scores as it is, because I think it's probably the most accomplished of the series yet. Is it a great film? Not really, but at the same time, if you're a fan of the series, if you've been following up to this point, you're going to enjoy this one, I think. Taking into consideration what it is, that's my review. I liked it, actually.